Caroline Mitchell adjusted her daughter's hair bow for the third time, her hands trembling slightly. At 32, she'd thought her days of blind dates were long behind her, especially now as a single mother to 4-year-old Lily, working double shifts as a waitress just to make rent each month. But her best friend Jessica had been so insistent, so certain that this would be different. "He's a good man, Caroline," Jessica had said. "Trust me on this one." Now, sitting in the elegant restaurant downtown, Caroline felt completely out of place. Her simple beige blouse with its delicate lace trim and her worn denim skirt seemed shabby compared to the polished diners around her. She'd braided her blonde hair to one side, hoping it looked intentional rather than hurried, which it was. Lily sat beside her in a cream-colored dress that Caroline had found at a thrift store, the little girl's brown curls falling softly around her face as she colored quietly in her activity book. Caroline checked her phone again. The reservation was under the name Thomas Whitmore. Jessica's cousin had arranged everything, or so she'd been told, but something felt wrong. This restaurant was too upscale, too refined. Jessica knew Caroline's situation. Why would she set her up at a place where a single appetizer cost more than Caroline spent on groceries for a week? A man approached their table and Caroline's breath caught. He was striking, probably in his mid-30s, with dark hair styled with care and strong, handsome features. His charcoal suit fit him perfectly, the kind of tailoring that spoke of serious money. He moved with quiet confidence, the way people do when they're accustomed to being in charge. "Caroline?" he asked, his voice warm but slightly uncertain. She stood quickly, almost knocking over her water glass. Yes, but I think there's been a mistake." He smiled, and something in that smile made her heart skip. It wasn't just that he was handsome. There was kindness there, a gentleness that seemed at odds with his polished appearance. "Thomas Whitmore," he said, extending his hand, "though most people call me Tom. Mr. Whitmore, I really think Jessica must have mixed something up." Caroline felt her cheeks burning. "I'm not the girl you were supposed to meet." Tom tilted his head, studying her face. "You're Caroline Mitchell, aren't you? Jessica's best friend since college? Works at Miller's Diner?" "Yes, but—" "And this must be Lily." He crouched down to the little girl's level, his expensive suit forgotten. "Hi there." "That's a beautiful picture you're coloring. Is that a butterfly?" Lily looked up shyly, then nodded. "It's for my mommy." "Because she likes pretty things, but we can't buy them." Caroline wanted to disappear. "Lily, sweetheart." But Tom just smiled again, that same gentle expression. "I think that's wonderful. Homemade gifts are always the best kind." "Please," he gestured to their chairs. "Won't you both sit down?" Caroline remained standing, her hands twisting together. "Mr. Whitmore, I really need to explain. Jessica told me she was setting me up with her cousin's friend. Someone normal. Someone who wouldn't mind that. I have a daughter and work long hours and still can't seem to get ahead. Not someone like you." "Someone like me?" His expression was genuinely curious, not offended. "Jessica said your name was Tom. She didn't mention the Whitmore part. I didn't realize until I got here and saw the reservation that you were Thomas Whitmore. The Thomas Whitmore who owns half the commercial real estate in the city, who was on the cover of Business Journal last month. I saw your picture in the waiting room at my dentist's office." Tom's smile turned slightly rueful, guilty as charged. "But I'm still just Tom. And Jessica told me you were smart and kind and had a beautiful daughter. She didn't mention you were also honest to a fault." "This isn't fair to you," Caroline pressed on, her voice dropping lower so Lily wouldn't hear. "I'm 32 years old with a 4-year-old, daughter and no college degree. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment and I use coupons at the grocery store. My ex-husband left before Lily was even born. I have nothing to offer someone in your position." The restaurant hummed quietly around them, the clink of silverware and murmur of conversation creating a backdrop to this uncomfortable moment. Tom stood there, his hands in his pockets now, his expression thoughtful. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then he pulled out a chair. "Please," he said simply, "sit with me. Have dinner. If at the end of the evening you still think this was all a mistake, I'll respect that. But give it a chance. Give me a chance." Something in his voice, in the genuine hope there, made Caroline sink slowly into her chair. Lily immediately scooted closer to her, always seeking that comfort of her mother's presence. Tom sat across from them, and a waiter appeared with menus. Caroline opened hers and nearly gasped at the prices. She closed it quickly. I'm not very hungry, actually. Would Lily like some chicken fingers? Tom asked, his attention on the little girl. Or maybe pasta? I hear the mac and cheese here is exceptional. Lily's eyes lit up. Real mac and cheese? Not from the box? Tom laughed, a genuine, warm sound. The real deal. With extra cheese if you want. Over the next hour, Caroline found herself gradually relaxing. Tom ordered thoughtfully, making sure to include things Lily would enjoy, never making Caroline feel embarrassed about her daughter's presence. He asked about Caroline's work, and really listened when she talked about the regular customers at the diner, the way old Mr. Patterson always left her a $5 tip even though he clearly couldn't afford it, or how Mrs. Chen brought her homemade dumplings on Fridays. You talk about them with real affection, Tom observed. Most people complain about their jobs. You talk about yours like it matters. It does matter, Caroline said quietly. Not the job itself, maybe, but the people. Some of them are so lonely that 15 minutes at my table might be the only conversation they have all day. How could that not matter? Tom nodded slowly, something shifting in his expression. My father started our company when I was Lily's age. He worked 18-hour days, built everything from nothing. When he died 3 years ago, 1,000 people came to his funeral. And you know what I realized? I couldn't remember the last real conversation I'd had with him. We talked about business, about strategy, about expansion, but not about things that mattered. The vulnerability in his voice surprised Caroline. This wasn't what she'd expected from a CEO, from someone who lived in a world so different from her own. I'm sorry, she said softly. That must have been very hard. It still is. He paused, watching Lily carefully arrange her remaining pasta into patterns on her plate. Jessica told me you were looking to get back into school. That you wanted to finish your degree? Caroline felt that familiar ache of deferred dreams. Eventually. When Lily's older, when I've saved enough. I was studying art history before I got pregnant. Not exactly practical, but I loved it. Learning about how people throughout history have tried to capture beauty, to make meaning out of life. She shook her head. It seems silly now. It doesn't seem silly at all, Tom said firmly. It sounds beautiful, important. They talked through dessert, through coffee. Lily fell asleep with her head on Caroline's lap, clutching a chocolate-stained napkin. The restaurant began to empty around them, but neither seemed to notice. Tom told her about the pressure of running a company. He'd inherited rather than built, about board members who saw him as too young, too soft, about nights spent alone in a penthouse apartment, surrounded by expensive things that meant nothing, about the loneliness of always being Thomas Whitmore, CEO and never just Tom person. Caroline told him about the fear that kept her awake at night, wondering if she was enough for Lily, if her daughter would resent her someday for the things they couldn't afford, for the absent father, for the tiny apartment and the second-hand clothes, about the guilt of wanting something more for herself, when she should be grateful for what she had. You know what I think? Tom said finally, his voice gentle in the near-empty restaurant. I think Jessica is smarter than both of us. She knew exactly what she was doing. What do you mean? She told me you'd try to talk your way out of this date. That you'd be convinced someone like me couldn't possibly want to be here. He leaned forward slightly. But she also told me that if I could just get you to stay, to really talk to me, I'd understand why she's been trying to set us up for 6 months. Caroline's eyes widened. 6 months? She's persistent, your friend. Kept telling me I needed to meet someone real, someone who understood what actually mattered in life. I kept putting her off, making excuses. Work was busy. I wasn't ready to date. The usual things. He smiled that gentle smile again. Then she showed me a picture of you and Lily at the park. You were pushing her on a swing and you were both laughing. And I thought, when was the last time I laughed like that? When was the last time I felt something real? Caroline felt tears pricking at her eyes. This can't work. You have to see that. We're from completely different worlds. Are we? Because from where I'm sitting, we're both just people trying to figure out how to live meaningful lives. You do it by caring for your daughter and being kind to lonely customers at a diner. I do it by, well, honestly, I'm not sure I do it at all. Maybe that's what Jessica saw, that I needed someone to show me what actually matters. Lily stirred in Caroline's lap, mumbling something about butterflies. Caroline stroked her daughter's hair, her mind racing. This didn't make sense. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. Wealthy, handsome CEOs didn't fall for struggling single mothers over chicken fingers and childhood dreams. But looking at Tom's face, at the hope and loneliness there that mirrored her own, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, real connection didn't follow the rules she'd always assumed. "I should probably get her home," Caroline said softly. "It's way past her bedtime." Tom nodded, but there was a question in his eyes. Would it be all right if I called you? Maybe we could do this again? Somewhere less fancy, maybe. The park or just coffee?" Caroline hesitated. Every practical bone in her body screamed that this was a mistake, that she was setting herself up for heartbreak, that people from different worlds didn't build lives together. But then she remembered what her grandmother used to say, that sometimes the heart knows things the head can't understand. "Yes," she heard herself say. "I'd like that." Tom's smile transformed his face. He helped Caroline gather Lily's things, insisted on paying for dinner despite Caroline's protests, and walked them to her old car in the parking garage. He didn't seem bothered by the rust or the check engine light that glowed perpetually on the dashboard. "Drive safe," he said, and then, with a gentleness that made Caroline's heart ache, he added, "Thank you for staying, for giving us a chance." That night, after tucking Lily into bed and cleaning up the dinner dishes, Caroline called Jessica. "You set me up with Thomas Whitmore," she said without preamble. "The CEO, Thomas Whitmore." Jessica's laugh came through the phone. "I set you up with Tom. A good man who's lonely and kind and who needed to meet someone real. The fact that he's also successful doesn't change who he is. Jess, this can't work. You have to see that." "Why not?" "Because he has money and you don't? Because his life looks different from yours?" Jessica's voice grew serious. "Caroline, I've known you since we were 18 years old. I've watched you pour everything you have into being a good mother, into being a good person. And I've watched Tom since he was my cousin's college roommate. He's lost, Caroline. He's successful and wealthy and completely lost. You two need each other. You just needed someone to help you see it." Over the following weeks, Caroline learned that Jessica was right. Tom called the next day and they talked for 2 hours. He came to the diner for lunch, sitting at Caroline's section, charming her regulars with his genuine interest in their stories. He met them at the park on Saturday mornings, pushing Lily on the swings, building elaborate sand castles that always collapsed, making them both laugh until their sides hurt. He never tried to fix Caroline's life with money or grand gestures. Instead, he brought coffee when she worked the early shift, helped Lily with her alphabet on quiet afternoons, listened to Caroline's dreams without judgment or dismissal. He shared his own struggles, the weight of responsibility, the isolation of his position, the fear that he was managing his father's legacy rather than building his own life. Caroline, in turn, showed him the small joys he'd been missing. The Saturday morning farmers market where vendors knew her by name, the library story hour where Lily picked out stacks of books, the satisfaction of a perfectly balanced tip jar at the end of a good shift, the way sunset looked from their tiny apartment balcony, nothing fancy but somehow beautiful anyway. 3 months later, sitting on that same balcony while Lily napped inside, Tom took Caroline's hand. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. "That first night, when you said you weren't the girl I was supposed to meet, you were wrong. You were exactly the girl I was supposed to meet. I just hadn't known I was looking for you." Caroline felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "I'm still scared. Scared this is too good to be real. Scared I'll wake up and it will all be gone." "I'm scared too," Tom admitted. "Scared I won't be a good enough partner for you, or father figure for Lily. Scared my world will somehow damage what you've built. But I'm more scared of going back to the way things were, of being alone in rooms full of people, of forgetting what really matters." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn from handling. He unfolded it carefully. It was Lily's butterfly drawing from that first night, the one she'd made for her mother because they couldn't buy pretty things. "She gave this to me when I walked you to your car," Tom said. "Told me to keep it safe until I understood what it meant." I think I finally do. It's not about having expensive things or impressive titles. It's about creating beauty wherever you are, with whatever you have. It's about love and effort and caring enough to try. Caroline looked at this man who'd entered her life so unexpectedly, who'd somehow fit himself into the small spaces of their world without trying to change them or expand them or fix them, who'd brought his own brokenness and loneliness and laid them alongside hers, not as problems to solve, but as truths to share. "So what do we do?" she asked softly. "We keep doing this," Tom said simply. "We build something real together. Your world and mine becoming ours. No pretending, no trying to be something we're not. Just honest and kind and present." Behind them, through the screen door, they heard Lily stirring from her nap. In a moment, she'd come looking for them, wanting a snack or a story or just the comfort of their presence. The afternoon would continue in its ordinary way, small moments strung together into a life that wasn't perfect but was true. Tom squeezed Caroline's hand. "I love you," he said. "You and Lily both. I don't know where this goes or how we navigate the complicated parts, but I know I want to try." Caroline thought about that first night, about how close she'd come to leaving, to letting fear and practicality rob her of this unexpected gift. She thought about Lily's innocent question, about real mac and cheese and chocolate-stained, napkins and the way some moments change everything. "I love you too," she whispered. "It terrifies me, but I do." And sitting there on her tiny balcony in her small apartment, with the man who wasn't supposed to be part of her story, Caroline understood something her grandmother had been trying to tell her all along. Love doesn't care about matching worlds or perfect timing or logical sense. It simply shows up, unexpected and honest, asking only for the courage to say yes. Sometimes the person you're supposed to meet is exactly the person you think you can't have. And sometimes if you're brave enough to stay for dinner, to let down your guard, to believe in the possibility of something real, you discover that the life you're building together is more beautiful than anything you could have bought or planned or imagined. The butterfly drawing hung on Tom's office wall now, a reminder that beauty doesn't require wealth, and family doesn't require perfection. It only requires presence, kindness, and the willingness to create something together, one small moment at a time.
Rain trickled down the glass windows, leaving streaks like ink bleeding through paper. The pale morning light pushed through the overcast sky, casting a soft glow inside Heavenly Bites, a small bakery nestled on a quiet street. Emma Carter flipped the open sign with a quiet sigh. The familiar chime of the brass doorbell rang out, a comforting yet bittersweet sound. She rolled up her sleeves, revealing smudges of flour on her forearms. The rich scent of vanilla, butter, and cinnamon filled the air, wrapping the space in warmth. But it did little to ease the weight pressing against her chest. A single envelope sat on the counter, a final notice from the bank. Her fingers trembled slightly as she picked it up. One more month. That was all she had left before everything slipped through her fingers. Taking a deep breath, Emma folded the letter and tucked it away in the drawer. She couldn't afford to dwell on it now. Instead, she reached for a worn-out notebook from the shelf, her grandmother's recipe book. The pages were yellowed, edges curled from years of use, each handwritten note a reminder of a legacy she was fighting to protect. She set to work, kneading the dough with rhythmic precision. Baking had always been her sanctuary, the act itself a silent promise that as long as she could create something beautiful, there was still hope. Outside, a sleek black car pulled up in front of the bakery, its tinted windows concealing the man inside. Emma had no idea that a storm was about to enter her life. The bakery door swung open, the soft chime of the brass bell signaling an arrival. Emma glanced up from the register and immediately froze. A man stood at the entrance, dressed in a sleek black suit, his dark brown hair perfectly styled, piercing blue eyes, scanning the room with quiet authority. He wasn't a customer. Alexander Hayes. Emma recognized the name instantly, CEO of Hayes Enterprises, the man who turned old neighborhoods into luxury developments, erasing small businesses like hers in the process. She clenched the napkin in her hand, forcing herself to stay composed. "Good morning, Miss Carter." His deep voice carried an air of absolute confidence. "If you're here to buy my bakery, don't waste your time," Emma shot back, crossing her arms. "I'm not here to buy," Alexander smirked, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a crisp white envelope. "I'm here to make you an offer." Emma eyed the envelope warily as he set it down on the counter between them. 6 months, Alexander said smoothly. You accompany me to events, dinners, press appearances. In return, I'll ensure you keep this bakery. Emma let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Are you serious? What kind of woman do you think I am? This is a business arrangement, no personal conditions, Alexander interrupted, his tone measured. Think of it as a strategic partnership. I need a reliable public image, and you need the financial backing to keep your bakery. It's mutually beneficial. Emma's instinct was to reject him immediately. She wasn't some accessory to be bought. But then her gaze flickered toward the drawer, where the bank's foreclosure notice still sat. Slowly, hesitantly, she picked up the envelope, her fingers trembling as she opened it. The numbers inside stole her breath away. It was enough to not only pay off her debts but expand the bakery. Alexander watched her, his gaze unreadable yet patient. You have 24 hours to decide, he said, sliding a business card toward her before turning to leave. The door closed behind him, leaving Emma standing in the middle of her bakery, an envelope in her hands and chaos in her heart. The crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting a golden glow over the grand ballroom. Elegant gowns swished against polished marble floors, the air thick with murmured conversations and the delicate clinking of champagne glasses. Emma Carter stood among it all, feeling completely out of place. The deep burgundy silk dress fit her perfectly. The high heels gave her extra confidence and stature, but nothing could ease the unease twisting in her stomach. Beside her, Alexander Hayes exuded effortless charm, clad in a tailored black tuxedo, his presence commanding yet composed. A glass of wine in one hand, his other rested lightly on the small of her back, a subtle but unmistakable mark of possession. He had brought her here as part of their agreement, to show the world that he was no longer just a ruthless businessman, but a man with a genuine connection. Relax, Emma, Alexander murmured, his lips barely brushing her ear. Just smile and pretend you're enjoying yourself. Emma tightened her grip around the delicate stem of her champagne flute, forcing herself to comply. She felt the weight of curious glances, silent assessments from guests who measured her against an invisible scale. She wasn't part of their world, and they all knew it, but she had agreed to this deal, and she had to play her part convincingly. A middle-aged woman approached, diamonds glittering at her throat, recognition flashing in Emma's mind. A major real estate investor. Alexander, the woman drawled, a knowing glint in her eyes. How refreshing to see you with someone new. Emma barely had time to formulate a response before Alexander's hand at her waist pulled her closer. This is Emma Carter, owner of Heavenly Bites. She's an incredible talent and a woman with a vision. The words should have meant nothing. After all, this was just an act. But something about the way he said them stirred a strange warmth in her chest. The evening ended with them sliding into the back seat of a sleek black car. Silence stretched between them, the hum of the city filling the air. Emma stared out the window, watching reflections of neon lights dance across the glass. This arrangement was supposed to be a safe path, a means to an end. But where exactly was it leading her? It was late. But inside Heavenly Bites, the warm glow of the kitchen lights still illuminated trays of freshly baked pastries, filling the air with the scent of butter and vanilla. Emma Carter moved with effortless precision, kneading dough with practiced hands. The rhythmic sound of her whisk blending ingredients was like a familiar melody, soothing in its simplicity. She loved these moments, alone with her flour, sugar, and her grandmother's recipes. Here, there were no business deals, no scrutinizing gazes, just her and her craft. The kitchen door creaked open, snapping her out of her thoughts. She turned around, startled to see Alexander Hayes standing there, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his tie loosened. He looked tired, but there was something in his gaze. Curiosity, maybe even admiration. "What are you doing here?" Emma asked, masking her surprise. Alexander stepped further inside, leaning against the counter like he belonged there. "I was driving past and saw the lights on. Figured you'd still be working." Emma arched a brow. "Since when do you care about my schedule?" Alexander smirked, his eyes drifting to the flour dusted across her arms. "I suppose I'm curious. You spend all your time here, alone with these recipes. What is it about baking that keeps you coming back? Emma hesitated for a moment, then reached for a lavender honey tart from a cooling tray, placing it on a plate in front of him. Taste and find out. He studied her for a moment before picking up the pastry, taking a bite. As soon as the flavors hit his tongue, his expression shifted, subtle but unmistakable. The crispness of the crust, the smoothness of the honey-infused filling, and the delicate floral notes of lavender all melded together perfectly. This is... He swallowed slowly, as if savoring every last hint of flavor. Incredible. Emma met his gaze, and for the first time, he wasn't just looking at her. He was seeing her. "Now you understand," she said softly, a small smile playing at her lips. Alexander didn't respond right away, but when he finally set the plate down, the look in his eyes said everything. The golden hues of sunset bathed the streets as Emma Carter locked up Heavenly Bites for the night. The last rays of light danced on the shop's windows, reflecting her image. Tired, yet undeniably filled with a warmth she couldn't quite explain. She couldn't pinpoint when Alexander Hayes had become a part of her daily life. At first, he had been nothing more than a distant figure, a business partner in an agreement she had reluctantly entered. But somewhere along the way, his presence had stopped feeling like an obligation and started feeling natural. Like now, working this late again? Emma turned at the sound of his voice, finding Alexander leaning casually against his car. His sharp blue eyes held something softer tonight, and without his usual crisp composure, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, he looked almost approachable. "The bakery doesn't run itself," she replied, attempting a neutral tone, but the way his gaze lingered on her made her stomach tighten. Alexander stepped forward, pressing a warm paper cup into her hands. "Chamomile honey tea. Thought you might need it." Emma blinked in surprise, staring at the cup before looking up at him. "You remembered I like this?" He shrugged, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "I pay attention." Her heart skipped. He didn't have to do this, but he did. They walked down the quiet street in companionable silence, their footsteps the only sound against the evening breeze. Emma realized something. Being beside Alexander, silence wasn't uncomfortable anymore. "Have you ever thought about expanding the bakery?" he asked suddenly. Emma chuckled. "I'm barely keeping it afloat, and you think I can expand?" Alexander stopped walking and turned to face her. "I think you can do anything if you want to." She swallowed hard. He had said it with such certainty she wanted to believe him. Emma didn't know what was happening between them, but she knew one thing. Something was changing. The rain pounded against the city like a relentless drumbeat, echoing off the glass roof of Heavenly Bites. Inside, Emma Carter sat hunched over her laptop, her breath caught in her throat as her eyes scanned the words flashing across the screen. Hayes Enterprises unveils plans for urban redevelopment to small businesses to be replaced by luxury commercial complex. The images on the screen blurred as hot tears welled in her eyes. There it was, her entire street, her beloved bakery, reduced to nothing more than a footnote in a corporate expansion plan. The place she had fought so hard to keep alive was now just a casualty of progress. Her fingers trembled as she grabbed her phone, dialing Alexander's number, straight to voicemail, again and again. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. This wasn't happening. He had promised her. He had stood in her bakery, watched her pour her heart into every pastry, every recipe. Had all of it been a lie? Emma's breath came in short gasps. All of Alexander's words, the quiet reassurances, the warm glances, the late nights where he listened to her talk about her dreams, were they all just lies? Her hands clenched into fists, rage building in her chest. She had trusted him. She had let herself believe that beneath his sharp, calculating exterior, there was something real. But in the end, he was exactly who she feared he was. She ripped the contract in half, letting the pieces flutter to the ground before grabbing her coat and storming out into the rain. The doors to Alexander Hayes' office burst open with a force that silenced the entire boardroom. Every executive turned, startled by the sight of Emma, drenched from the storm, her eyes burning with fury. Alexander was already on his feet, surprise flashing across his face. "Emma!" Before he could say another word, she slammed a printed copy of the article onto the table in front of him. "When exactly were you planning to tell me?" Her voice trembled with barely contained anger. "After I had completely trusted you?" Alexander glanced at the paper, his jaw tightening. "Emma, it's not what you think." "Not what I think?" She let out a bitter laugh. "You told me this arrangement was just for show. You told me you weren't trying to destroy my bakery, and yet here we are. Tell me, was I just a fool in your grand plan?" He took a step toward her, but she instinctively stepped back. She didn't believe the softness in his eyes anymore. "Let me explain," he said, his voice lower now, tinged with something dangerously close to desperation. But Emma was too hurt to listen. She turned on her heel, walking away from the man she had started to believe in, leaving behind shattered trust and a dream that was now nothing more than rubble. The sky hung heavy over the city, a dull gray curtain mirroring the storm inside Emma Carter. She walked along the familiar streets, where the scent of coffee and freshly baked pastries lingered in the crisp autumn air. But today, the warmth she once felt was gone. After everything that happened with Alexander Hayes, she felt drained. Heavenly Bites stood on the edge of ruin. Customers still came, but the whispers of demolition cast a shadow over the bakery. They loved her, but they feared the inevitable. How long before the bakery was nothing more than a memory? Emma stopped in front of her shop and immediately noticed something unusual. A basket of fresh lavender sat at her doorstep, a small note tucked beneath it. "I'm sorry, please meet me, Alexander." She gripped the note tightly, torn between anger and uncertainty. What was there left to say? More lies? Yet somehow, despite everything, her feet carried her toward the meeting place. A small rooftop garden atop an old building, once home to a famed restaurant that had long since closed. Alexander was already there, his sharp blue eyes holding something she had never seen before: regret. When he saw her, a visible tension left his shoulders. "Emma, thank you for coming." She crossed her arms, her voice cool. "You have 5 minutes." For a moment, Alexander hesitated, as if choosing his words carefully. Then he handed her a folder. "This is the new contract. I bought back the development rights to the district." Emma flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning the terms. The project had changed. No demolitions, no luxury complexes. Instead, the entire area would be transformed into a cultural and culinary hub, preserving small businesses. She looked up at him, suspicion still in her gaze. "Why are you doing this?" Alexander exhaled slowly before saying, "Because you made me see the world differently, and I can't lose you." Something inside Emma shifted. She wasn't sure if she could trust him again, but at least this wasn't a game anymore. Emma stood on the rooftop of the old building, the folder in her hands feeling heavier than anything she had ever held before. Inside it was everything she had ever wanted, a chance to save her bakery, to protect her neighborhood. But it wasn't just that. She looked at Alexander Hayes, the man who had once embodied everything she despised: cold ambition, ruthless decisions, a detachment from anything that didn't serve his interests. But now he stood before her, not as a conqueror, but as a man risking everything. "You didn't do this just for the neighborhood," she said slowly, searching his sharp blue eyes for the truth. Alexander let out a quiet laugh, but there was no mockery in it. "No, I did this for you." Her heart clenched. She wanted to believe him, but fear still lingered. "How do I know you won't change again?" He stepped closer, the space between them vanishing. "You don't, but I'm willing to spend forever proving it to you." Emma took a deep breath. She had fought her feelings for weeks, convincing herself that this was just a business deal, that she felt nothing for him. But every glance, every moment they shared, it had all been real. She tightened her grip on the folder, then slowly nodded. "Okay." Alexander's brows furrowed. "Okay?" Emma looked up at him, determination shining in her gaze. "I believe you." And before logic could stop her, she rose on her toes, pulling him into a kiss. Not a bargain, not an agreement, but a promise. 1 month later. The golden hues of sunset draped over the city like powdered sugar on a freshly baked pastry. Heavenly Bites was closing for the evening, and Emma Carter wiped down the counter while sneaking a glance outside. Alexander Hayes stood there, hands in his pockets, his gaze distant, as if deep in thought. He had changed. Gone was the ruthless businessman who once saw the world in numbers and deals. He had proven himself to the neighborhood, to her dreams, and maybe to her heart. Stepping outside, she pulled her coat tighter as a cool breeze passed. "What are you doing here?" Alexander turned, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Waiting for you." Before she could question him, he took her hand, leading her down the softly lit streets. They passed bustling cafes, twinkling lanterns overhead, and shop owners laughing as they closed for the night. Not a soulless corporate development, but a thriving, living community. At last, he brought her to the rooftop garden, where they had once spoken of impossible choices. But tonight, something was different. Tiny string lights hung across the space, a small table set for two, with wine and pastries. Her heart began to race. Alexander turned to her, his deep blue eyes reflecting the night sky. "Emma," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "I used to think success was everything, that life was about numbers and contracts. But then you came along, with flour on your hands, with a smile that made me forget everything else, with pastries that carried pieces of your soul." She held her breath as he dropped to one knee, a small velvet box in his hands. "I've spent my life chasing the wrong things, but this time I know for certain. I don't want a contract, I want a promise. With you. Forever." He opened the box, revealing a ring. Simple, timeless, perfect, just like them. "Emma Carter, will you marry me?" Tears welled in her eyes. This time, she didn't hesitate. She smiled, her voice trembling with emotion. "Yes." As Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms, Emma knew this wasn't just a love story. This was their beginning. Eleanor Sinclair had spent her entire life inside a gilded cage, a place where everything was flawless, yet she was shackled by the invisible chains of duty and purity. As the only daughter of Senator Alexander Sinclair, she had been raised to be a perfect lady, a pristine pearl, carefully preserved until the day she would become a bargaining chip in a marriage of power and advantage. At 23, Eleanor had never been kissed, never felt the warmth of a lover's touch, never even dreamed of freedom. Her life had been meticulously planned, every step dictated by her father's ambitions, and she had always obeyed. Until that day. Senator Sinclair entered her room, his face pale, his eyes heavy with dread. "You're getting married, Eleanor. We have no choice." Her stomach twisted. Married? She looked at her father, waiting for an explanation, but deep down she already knew. His political empire had crumbled, his reputation lay in ruins, and now she was the last asset he could trade. The man he had chosen for her was not a noble gentleman nor a stranger, but Leon Hawthorne, a ruthless businessman, a man who could make the world bow at his feet with power and wealth. And in that moment, Eleanor knew her life would never be her own again. Eleanor sat motionless, her wide eyes staring ahead, yet inside she felt nothing but a hollow emptiness. Her father's words echoed in her mind, each syllable carving cold, merciless cuts into her soul. Marriage. She should have fought back, should have screamed, should have begged her father not to do this. But his eyes, heavy with defeat, told her everything. This was not a choice. This was a sentence already written. Her father had lost everything. His political allies had turned their backs, his name was tainted, and debts loomed over him like a guillotine. He needed a way out. And that way out was her. "Leon Hawthorne has agreed." His voice was hollow, as if even he couldn't believe the words he was saying. Eleanor had heard of the man. A dangerous man. Someone who possessed the very things the world craved: money, power, and merciless ambition. Leon Hawthorne was no charming aristocrat. He was a businessman, a predator in the corporate world, a man who never took no for an answer, a man feared even by those who ruled the country. She had seen him once on the cover of a financial magazine. Dark, piercing eyes, a sharp, commanding face. A man who didn't just own companies, he owned people as if they were commodities to be traded. And now she was the commodity. "The wedding is set for this weekend," her father murmured, avoiding her gaze. A wedding, a transaction, a contract signed in cold black ink. And in just a few days, Eleanor Sinclair would cease to exist. She would become Mrs. Leon Hawthorne. Eleanor's wedding felt like a sentence being passed down. There were no flowers, no laughter, no heartfelt blessings, only a cold transaction signed between two men, one desperate and one in control. She wore a dress she did not choose, spoke vows she did not believe, and signed her name on a piece of paper that sealed her fate forever. There was no celebration, no honeymoon, only a sleek black car waiting to take her away, straight to Leon Hawthorne's estate. The towering structure of glass and stone loomed under the night sky, as cold and unyielding as the man waiting for her inside. The door shut behind her. The driver led her to the master bedroom, a vast, dark space where the bed stood like an altar for sacrifice. Her breath hitched as she heard the door open behind her. Leon Hawthorne stepped inside, shrugging off his jacket, loosening his tie. His gaze was dark, intense, trailing down her form, quiet possession flashing behind those steel-like eyes. "Did you really think you'd sleep alone tonight?" His voice was low, edged with danger, cutting through the silence like a blade. Eleanor instinctively stepped back, but her spine met the cold, unyielding wall. Leon moved forward, slow and deliberate, like a predator, toying with its prey. "You're my wife, Eleanor." His head tilted slightly, eyes sharp and calculating. "And I always take what's mine." Her heartbeat pounded against her ribs. There was no escape. And tonight, this beast would take the last piece of her she had left. Morning light seeped through the thick curtains, casting a soft glow over Eleanor's bare skin. She lay motionless among the tangled sheets, her body exhausted, aching. But what unsettled her most was the emptiness settling deep inside her. The remnants of last night clung to her, his scent on her skin, his warmth lingering on the pillow, the ghost of his hands tracing every inch of her body. Leon Hawthorne was no longer there, yet he was everywhere. His presence filled the room like an invisible chain wrapping around her. Eleanor clutched the sheets closer, trying to still the tremors running through her. She should hate him, she should despise him. But what terrified her most was herself. She hadn't fought him, she hadn't pushed him away, and worst of all, she had responded. The door swung open. Leon entered, his hair damp from a shower, the crisp black shirt hanging open at the top, exposing the hard lines of his chest. His gaze found hers, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips, as if he could read every thought racing through her mind. "Did you sleep well?" His voice was low, teasing. Eleanor gripped the sheets tighter. "You forced me." Leon chuckled, a dark, knowing sound. He moved closer, slow, deliberate, watching her the way a predator watches its prey. "Forced?" he repeated, leaning down, his face now just inches from hers. "Don't lie to me, Eleanor. You moaned under me, welcomed me." His voice dropped to a whisper. "More than once." Her breath hitched. She wanted to deny it, wanted to push him away. But the most terrifying truth of all was that she couldn't. The days that followed passed in a reality Eleanor had never imagined. Leon was not just the man who had taken her on their wedding night, but also the man who surrounded her with a terrifying kind of tenderness. He never let her out of his reach, not as a tyrant, but as a man who was afraid of losing the woman he loved. His touch was no longer about possession, but something far more dangerous, as if without her, he wouldn't know how to breathe. His arms pulled her close every night, holding her as if she was the only thing anchoring him to this world. And Eleanor could no longer deny that she felt it too. It was in the way he placed a cup of tea exactly the way she liked it every morning. Every morning, when she woke, breakfast was already waiting, not prepared by the servants, but by his own hands. A cup of tea, brewed just the way she liked, toast perfectly crisp, fruit sliced with meticulous care, as if he had memorized her preferences long ago. "You made this yourself?" she asked one morning, surprised as she stared at the plate in front of her. Leon simply shrugged, pride flickering in his dark eyes. "You're my wife. Who else would take better care of you?" He never needed to say, "I love you," because it was there in every gesture. When she walked through the garden, he watched from a distance, always ready to shield her when the wind picked up. When she was tired, he pulled her into his lap, massaging her feet, pressing a silent kiss against her forehead. Eleanor had once thought Leon only knew how to take, but the night she fell ill, he stayed awake beside her, pressing cool cloths to her burning skin, holding her as if her smallest pain could destroy him. She should hate him, she should want to run. But as she lay in his arms during the long nights, Eleanor knew there was no going back. Leon Hawthorne had claimed her body that first night. But the most terrifying thing of all was that he was slowly claiming her heart as well. That morning, Eleanor had barely taken a sip of her tea when the dining room doors swung open. The butler entered, his face grave. "Sir, there's a call. Your lawyer says it's urgent." Leon set his coffee down, eyes darkening as he reached for the phone. Eleanor could feel the tension rolling off him in waves. She couldn't hear the full conversation, but the clipped words she caught sent a chill through her. What the hell is he doing? His voice turned sharp. No, absolutely not. When the call ended, he tossed the phone onto the table, his expression unreadable. Your father wants you back. Eleanor froze. Isn't our contract enough to keep me here? Her voice was quiet, but the worry was evident. Leon let out a cold laugh. Sinclair thinks he can use lawyers to take you from me. He forgets. You're not his anymore. Before she could respond, he stood and pulled her with him. We're going to see him, now. The glass skyscraper where her father waited loomed over them, imposing and sterile. Inside the boardroom, Senator Alexander Sinclair rose to his feet the moment they entered. He looked thinner than before, but his gaze was still sharp, still commanding. Eleanor, you don't have to endure this. Come home with me. Leon's grip on her waist tightened, his voice cold as steel. She's not going anywhere. Her father met Leon's gaze head on. This contract can be undone. I will fight until it is. Leon only smirked, tugging Eleanor closer. She's not some possession for you to reclaim. Then he bent down, murmuring into her ear, Tell him, Eleanor. She took a deep breath. Under her father's expectant stare, she spoke slowly but firmly. Enough. Both men turned to look at her, but she didn't meet their eyes. She focused only on her own breathing, her own decision. She turned to her father, her voice calm but firm. You can't use me as a trade anymore. Then she faced Leon, pain flickering in her gaze but no longer fear. And neither can you. Silence filled the room. Eleanor turned away, stepping toward the door. No one stopped her. And for the first time in a long while, she felt free. Leon had searched everywhere. He knew Eleanor couldn't have gone too far. Then he remembered. One evening, she had once told him about a place she always went when she felt lost. A lavender field just outside the city. When he arrived, the world felt different. The golden hues of the setting sun bathed the lavender field in a surreal glow, but his eyes found only her. Standing there, lost in thought, the breeze lifting strands of her hair, Eleanor looked almost untouchable. Like a dream he was afraid to wake from. She was still, her gaze lost in the horizon. The wind played with her hair, and in that moment, Leon realized she had never looked more breathtaking. He stepped closer but said nothing. Eleanor knew he was there. She didn't turn around, only murmured, Why did you come looking for me? Leon exhaled. Because you're not a transaction, Eleanor. His voice was low, unsteady. You are the one thing I can't afford to lose. She let out a soft chuckle, not mocking but thoughtful. She finally turned to face him, her eyes holding a gentleness he had never seen before. Then prove it, Leon. Leon drove Eleanor home in silence. The entire way back, she said nothing, only gazing out the window, as if still lost in the scent of lavender. He didn't push her to speak. He was afraid that if he did, she would slip away again. When the car stopped in front of the estate, Eleanor stepped out, but instead of heading inside, she hesitated at the entrance. "Do you think bringing me back means you get to keep me?" Her voice was soft, almost distant. Leon's fists clenched. He knew that if he didn't act now, he would lose her. Without hesitation, he dropped to his knees right there, on the doorstep of their home. At her feet. Eleanor froze. "Don't leave." His voice was low, raw with desperation. "I don't know how to love you the way you deserve, but I know I can't exist without you." The man who had always stood above everyone else, the man who had never bowed to anyone, was now on his knees before her, as if losing her meant losing everything. Eleanor looked down at him, meeting his pleading gaze, but she didn't answer right away. She had once been controlled, once been forced to stay, but this time she wanted him to understand that love was not about possession. She knelt down beside him, her fingers brushing against his face, her voice gentle but firm. "If you truly want me, Leon, then prove it. Not with words, not with possession, but with the way you choose to love me." As she spoke, something inside her shifted. She had spent so long fearing him, fighting him, but now, for the first time, she saw a man, not a monster. A man trembling at the edge of losing her. The next morning, the estate gates swung open and a fleet of black cars pulled into the driveway. Her father's lawyers had arrived. Eleanor stood by the window, watching as they stepped out, men in dark suits carrying documents, symbols of her father's power. Leon stood beside her, his body tense, his gaze dark and unreadable. "He really thinks he can take you from me?" His voice was low, dangerously cold. Eleanor said nothing. Instead, she gently placed her hand on his arm, a silent reassurance. Then she stepped outside. Her father's lawyers were waiting, stiff and formal. "Eleanor, come with us. This contract can be undone. Your father has arranged everything to bring you home." She looked at them, then back at Leon. The man who had once forced her into his world, yet now stood waiting, uncertain, afraid. Eleanor took a slow, deep breath before stepping beside Leon. She met the lawyer's eyes, her voice calm, yet resolute. "I choose to stay." Silence. The lawyers exchanged glances, then turned and left without another word. The estate gates closed behind them. Leon didn't wait. He pulled Eleanor into his arms, kissing her, not like a man claiming possession, but like a man who had fallen irrevocably in love. They were no longer hunter and prey. They were two souls melting into each other with a love that was finally real. 1 month later, Eleanor was sitting in the small garden behind the estate when a car pulled up at the gate. She lifted her head, her heart tightening as she saw her father step out. He looked older. His hair had more gray. His eyes no longer held the pride they once did. Instead, there was only deep regret. She stood, waiting as he approached. "Eleanor," his voice wavered, "I was wrong." She didn't speak, allowing him to continue. "I treated you like a pawn. I forced you into this marriage without thinking about your happiness. But do you know," he took a shaky breath, "for the past month, I've wondered if I even deserve to call myself your father anymore." Tears welled in her eyes, but she simply smiled and stepped forward, wrapping her arms around him. "You will always be my father," she whispered, "and you didn't condemn me to misery. I found someone who cherishes me, who loves me in ways I never expected." For a moment, Senator Sinclair stiffened. Then, slowly, he embraced his daughter for the first time in years. From that day on, things got better. Eleanor and Leon lived in a world filled with love. Leon worshiping her with the kind of devotion she had once feared, now embraced. 3 years later, the lavender fields stretched endlessly under the golden hues of the setting sun. Eleanor stood there, her hand intertwined with Leon's, both watching as two small figures ran through the sea of flowers. Their twin children, a boy and a girl, giggled as they chased butterflies, their laughter ringing like the sweetest melody. Eleanor leaned her head against Leon's shoulder, feeling his arms tighten protectively around her. "Are you happy?" he murmured. She smiled, her gaze still locked on their children. "I've never been happier." The soft breeze carried the scent of lavender, mingling with the laughter of their little ones. From an unwanted marriage, from a relationship once built on obsession and control, they had found something real, love, unwavering and true. And this was the happiest ending they could have ever wished for.